Today we're looking at what states have the highest percentage of Muslim residents in 2023. We've done a lot of videos in recent months on race and religion. We've done almost every major race and faith in the US, and today we knock off one more of the major religions, so to speak, the Muslim population of the United States. In past videos, I've explained that I held off doing these videos because I didn't want the comments section to get as ugly as they tend to get whenever you touch on a subject like this. But I got enough requests and I had a few conversations and we decided to pull the trigger on this series. Every race, every faith, everyone, they have their stereotypes. The Muslim population is no different. Here's what most people don't understand about the Muslim people. They are incredibly family-orientated people that just want to be happy and live their lives in peace. I think stereotypes really do them an injustice. I mean, stereotypes normally do anyone an injustice, but them just a little bit more, it seems like. At least that's my experience. Today we look at the Muslim community of the United States. While I was doing the research, I realized more than any other demographic so far, the stats vary. There are different studies and organizations that post these stats. They were a little different, but most of the time they were somewhat close. As an example, there was one organization that said the Muslim population of Los Angeles is what everyone else said was the entire state of California, so they had to be a little off. So we're going by the US Census numbers for the percentage of the population that is Muslim or identifies as Muslim in the top 10 states. Got it? Get it? Good. Let's take a look. Number 10, California. Now this is the one I was talking about. I found a few studies, including one by Pew Research and the Census, that were pretty close. A majority of the Muslims that do live in California live in the Los Angeles metro area and Orange County, so Southern California basically. And the research says that there's about 500,000 Muslims living in California. That doesn't seem like a lot, especially when you know how big California is, but you gotta remember there's a lot of communities that are just out in the boondocks that nobody really lives there, and a lot of minorities won't move out there or don't want to. But this is the one organization says that there's closer to 600,000 Muslims living in Los Angeles alone. But California has about 500,000 Muslims living in the state, putting them about 1.3% of the population. Number 9, Arizona. Back in 2014, Arizona estimated that their Muslim population was under 1% of the total population of the state. And back then, the study found that a lot of them really didn't engage in a lot of the different community activities and really just kind of stayed to themselves. Well, things have changed since 2014. They're finding the Muslim residents are getting more involved in different things, including politics in the Grand Canyon state. It is estimated that Arizona has about 110,000 Muslims living in the state, putting them at about 1.5% of the population. Number 8, Massachusetts. This one surprised me a little bit. They have over 20 mosques in the state of Massachusetts, with the majority of them being in the Boston metro area. The universities in Massachusetts have an above average amount of Muslim students, and Cambridge has a pretty good size Muslim community. So I'm a little shocked that they're not higher on the list. But overall, I'm shocked at how low the numbers are. I thought they would be a lot more. They estimate there's about 133,000 Muslims living in Massachusetts, making up about 1.9% of Massachusetts' population. Number 7, Virginia. Virginia has a pretty good sized Muslim community. Just like Massachusetts, a lot of their universities have an above average enrollment of Muslim students. A majority of the Muslim population in Virginia lives in the Arlington, Alexandria area. But down in the southern part of the state, there's a town called Emporia. It is west of Virginia Beach, not too far from the North Carolina border. Emporia has the highest population of Muslims in the United States, and that's as of the 2020 census, with 29% of the city's population being Muslim. Besides being a pretty cool small town, they also have one of the greatest streets ever named. Virginia's Muslim population is about 170,000, a little under, making up about 2% of their population. Number 6, Minnesota. This one should be no surprise if you know anything about Minnesota. The Minneapolis-St. Paul area has pretty large Muslim communities. I know a stand-up comedian from Minnesota. He is Muslim, and one time, right after he mentioned he was from Minneapolis, one of the hecklers, some drunk guy in the crowd, said, "I thought you guys only came from the desert." He said, "Sir, that's not true." The guy said, "Well, that's what they taught me in school." And he goes, "Oh, well, that makes sense. Around 8th grade, they tell you that it's not just a warm weather faith." I don't want to talk down about your 7th grade education, but hey, there are a lot of successful janitors with a 7th grade education. And then he just moved on. The guy sat there and stared at his drink. But yes, Minnesota does have a good-sized Muslim population. They have almost 115,000 Muslims living in the state of Minnesota, making up about 2% of their population. Number 5, Michigan. I'm a little surprised at this one. I thought it would be higher on the list, like number 2 maybe. But here they are at number 5. Michigan's always had a good-sized Muslim population, but late in the 20th century, they had a big migration of people from the Middle East to Michigan. The largest ethnic grouping is now composed of descendants of various nationalities of that area, like Muslims and Christians from Lebanon and Palestine, as well as immigrants from Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. If you look at Dearborn, Michigan, which is in the Detroit metro area, they have a huge community of Muslims living there. Almost 242,000 Michigan residents are considered Muslim, making up about 2.4% of Michigan's population. Number 4, Maryland. Baltimore is considered one of the most Muslim-friendly cities in the United States. Again, another place that has a really good Muslim community. Good size in Baltimore. Now they say it's Muslim friendly, but really it's not friendly to anyone, so I'm not sure how they made that distinction. But the numbers show that Baltimore has a good sized Muslim population. The entire state of Maryland has 189,000 Muslims, making up about 3.1% of their population. Number 3, New Jersey. If you didn't know New Jersey has a good-sized Muslim population, you've never been to Paterson. Paterson is a very diverse community. It's home to the largest Turkish-American community in the United States. It's also known as Little Istanbul, and it's home to the second largest Arab-American community after Dearborn, Michigan. That's just Paterson, New Jersey. They have other communities sprinkled throughout the Garden State. New Jersey has a Muslim population of almost 322,000, making up about 3.5% of New Jersey's population. That's a good-sized community right there. Number 2, New York. I'm sure a lot of you thought New York would be number 1. I mean, I kind of did. New York, and especially New York City, is a giant melting pot. Now, some of the other cities like Buffalo have large Muslim communities. But New York City obviously is going to have the lion's share of just about any demographic you can come up with. Just kind of their thing. The majority of current Muslim residents in New York trace their American part of their history to the 1980s and 1990s when New York began receiving Muslim refugees from war-torn areas of the world, as well as green card lottery recipients from countries like Bangladesh and Central Asian republics. But yeah, New York State has always had a large Muslim population for generations, and they've just been continually growing. Just knowing the history of migration and how it is such a melting pot, I'm surprised that's as low a percentage as they actually have. Almost 750,000 New York residents are Muslim, making up about 3.6% of the population of New York State. All right, before we get to number 1, don't forget we have another channel called On This Day. There's a link for that down below. We're trying to get to 100,000 in the next year or so really appreciate it if you went over there and subscribed. All right, on to number 1. And number 1, Illinois. Illinois is a lot like New York, where their main city, Chicago, like New York City, is a melting pot, and a lot of different neighborhoods and a lot of different communities are in Chicago of every race, culture, and faith. Muslims being a good-sized community there. Now, you will find Muslims sprinkled throughout the state like everywhere, but a majority of them you're going to find in Chicago. The Council for American Islamic Relations estimates Chicago's Muslim population is about 300,000, maybe 50 up to 500,000. That's a big gap. What I've learned through research, when it's some kind of organization about a culture, a faith, race, whatever, their numbers seem to be a little more inflated than, let's say, an independent thing like Pew Research or the census. They have the Muslim population of Chicago alone in between 3 and 500,000, making that between 11 and 18% of Chicago's population. They also say there's over 50 mosques in the greater Chicago area. Other studies show that they have somewhere around 30. Chicago is considered a very Muslim-friendly city. There's a few different websites that listed which are the most Muslim-friendly cities and states. Illinois and Chicago are in the top 5. In recent years, Chicago has had a surge of immigration from Muslim countries. That started about 5 years ago. And they also have like second and third generation Muslim families in the city, which have contributed to the boom. Anyway, it is estimated that there's about 475,000 Muslims living in Illinois. So it's sort of on the higher end of what they think is in Chicago, that one organization. Anyway, that makes up about 3.7% of Illinois' population. All right, that's today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you got some information out of it. Now go out, have a great day, and be nice to each other.